Hello, Coconut Creek family. Joshua Rydell here, your current mayor, with a unique Creek Talk today. Today we're going to focus on providing you some information on Florida's constitutional amendments. Now, this year's going to be tricky come Election Day, November 6th, because we're going to see probably the longest ballot in the state's history. There's going to be amendments, constitutional amendments, both for the state as well as the county that are going to add to the extent and the length of the ballot. Today, we're going to do part one of the series, and I'm going to talk a little about, in a non-biased way, some of the Florida constitutional amendments that you're going to see. Now, amendment number one that you're going to see has to do, and it's formally called the homestead property tax exemption. Now, what does that mean? The homestead property tax exemption deals with giving an extra $25,000 of value in homestead value to properties assessed over $125,000. Meaning simply, if your house is worth $200,000, you typically get $25,000 off homestead additional, so your total homestead up to date would probably be about $50,000, and if this amendment passes, you'll get an additional $25,000. So bringing the home value on a $200,000 house down to, valued for the purposes of tax assessment, $125,000. Now, we almost think that that's a great thing, but there's two sides to the coin. One, it gives homeowners additional tax incentive to get more money back. Roughly, on an average median home in Coconut Creek, maybe $200 to $300 additional dollars a year that you may see in savings. So that's a benefit that some people on the pro side see to this. The con side is it's going to tighten budgets, both that municipalities like Coconut Creek and Broward County could assess. So there may be a shortage in some of the budgets, which you could see county taxes or municipal taxes increasing to make up for that differential in value. So those are really the two sides to the coin for amendment number one. Amendment number two deals with limitations on property tax assessments. Right now, taxes cannot go up more than 10% every year. Now, that amendment or regulation was passed years and years ago, and it ends formally on January 1st, 2019, the max 10% increase. This amendment moves to extend it indefinitely, saying that you cannot be assessed more than 10% in 1 year indefinitely. The pros are obviously you protect property owners from significant tax increases. There's no organized effort in regarding the cons, and this is something that really is more protecting of all citizens. So that's amendment number two. Amendment number three is one of the more, I'll say, popular amendments for the purposes of what you're seeing on TV, your commercials, your mail advertisement that you may see. And it has to do with voter control of gambling in the state of Florida. And what that specifically has to do with is changing who regulates gaming. Now, what does it do? It means that any expansion of gaming in Florida would have to be passed by the voters through amendment. So while we speak about these amendments, you need to understand that it requires 60% of the population to vote for them. So just because an amendment gets 51%, it doesn't mean that this amendment passes. It means you need to have more of that. So this amendment says that any change in gaming, a vote of yes on it, means any change in gaming has to be done by the people, by a 60% amendment change. And it takes it out of the legislators' hands to deal with gaming. On the pro side of this, you have companies like Disney and the Seminole Tribe. And on the con side of this, you have a lot of other people that are involved with parimutuel gaming, private slot machine houses that eventually would like to try to increase gaming in the state of Florida. So that's that one. Amendment number four deals with voter restoration, and that specifically deals with felons getting their right to vote back. State of Florida currently has a policy. If you become a convicted felon, you lose your right to vote no matter what it is, no matter how long it is ago, and you have to go to a clemency board in order to obtain your civil rights back and for them to be restored. This changes it, except for two people. The amendment's pretty clear. If you've ever been convicted of any sort of murder or sexual offense in any nature, you still have to go through that process. You don't automatically get your rights back. This restores rights. A vote of yes on this would restore the rights to vote to convicted felons. And there's actually a significant amount of them in the state that, for one reason or another, lost their voting rights. A vote of no on this essentially means that you don't want that and you don't want felons to have their rights back. We are one of, I think, 31 states that takes away people's rights upon a felony conviction. Amendment number 5 essentially states that there has to be a supermajority of legislators, 2/3 of the legislative branch, in order to raise any tax or fee in the state. Instead of the legislator right now needing a 51% split through legislation to increase taxes or fees, this amendment changes that and says, so a vote of yes on this amendment states that you want there to be a requirement that a supermajority of the legislator, almost all sides of the legislator, to agree to increase any tax or fee. A vote of no on this, you want to keep the status quo. It's going to be much more difficult for the legislator to raise any fees or taxes if you vote yes on the amendment, and the people for the no side want it to stay as the status quo. Amendment number 6, this is another one of those amendments that you've probably seen TV ads for. It actually deals with 2 parts, and which makes it more voluminous to read. It deals with the rights of crime victims, and it also deals with the judicial retirement age. I'll take the second one first. This amendment, if passed, changes the judicial retirement age from 70 to 75. Right now, judges that serve in our community, they are mandated by state law to retire at the age of 70. By changing this, and a vote of yes on this would mean you're okay with judges serving until they're 75 years old. The second prong of this deals with victims' rights, and it deals specifically, and I'll read it, to give crime victims due process to be reasonably protected from the accused. There's a litany of things that this amendment will do to bolster crime victim rights. A lot of the sheriff's organizations are for this amendment because it's a major expansion of victim rights, and the Florida Public Defenders Association and other civil rights groups such as the ACLU oppose this because they believe if someone is accused of a crime, that individual has rights, and this, for lack of a better term, would even the playing field. That's amendment number 6. Now, amendment number 7 deals with first responders and military members' survivor benefits. Now, this is a little more difficult because it goes hand in hand with the supermajority amendment to raise taxes, which we talked about earlier was amendment number 2. Under this amendment, it states that if a school, a college or university in the state of Florida, wants to raise its fee, it again has to have a supermajority of the Board of Governors. Right now, there has to be 12 out of 17 members on these Board of Governors at higher education institutions would have to be on board to raise tuitions or fees. Now, the reason it goes hand in hand with the legislator is because these methods, if the legislator has a more difficult time raising fees and schools have a harder time raising fees, they're going to have to make do with what they have, and it's a way to restrict them so they can't just keep increasing fees. Now, the pro of this amendment, amendment number 7, well, it guarantees keeping the cost of college and university school down significantly. The cons, since it's harder for the legislator to raise taxes based on the previous amendment, it could handicap a university's ability to pay for certain things. So that's the 2 sides of the coin for amendment number 7. There was an amendment 8. Don't get tricked if you don't see it on your ballot. It was actually stricken down by the Florida Supreme Court because it was too confusing, which you have to smile at because a lot of these amendments are confusing by nature and what they're asking for and are all traditionally intertwined. Amendment number 9 deals with prohibiting offshore oil and gas drilling. Right now, the state has the ability to sell to private markets rights to drill and get gas from our territorial waters. This amendment would prevent that. So a vote of yes on this amendment says we don't want private industry drilling for oil or gas on our coasts. Now, there's a second part of it, much like one of the earlier amendments. It also prohibits vaping in enclosed indoor workplaces. Now, years ago, the Constitution said you can't smoke in workplaces, in a place of work. This extends that to say now you can't vape. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, it's the cigarette culture has changed and things have become e-cigarettes and vaping cigarettes with vape stores and things of that nature. So this amendment, Amendment number 9, has two distinct parts. The first dealing with prohibiting offshore drilling, the second with an additional prohibition on vaping in enclosed indoor workspaces, where there has been for a long time a ban on traditional smoking. Amendment number 10 deals with state and local government structure and operation. Now, it's a little confusing, this one, but I'll tell you just what it does for the purposes of Broward County. Broward County has their structure and operational system pretty consistent with various other counties and how the state wants you to have it done. How it really affects Broward County and this specific amendment, Amendment number 10, there will now be an elected tax collector. There will be a tax collector's office that will become elected. So if Amendment number 10 passes, there'll be an additional constitutional officer in Broward County that becomes the de facto tax collector, which is, as of now, the county commission has been overseeing the purse strings of that budget. So a vote of yes on this creates an additional position. A vote of no on it keeps the status quo that the county commission deals with all collected taxes. And, of course, we have 9 elected county commissioners that oversee that. Interestingly enough, Miami-Dade County would be affected in a way as well with the election of a sheriff. The Miami-Dade County has no elected countywide sheriff, and this would require that to happen in Miami-Dade, so they would then have to elect a sheriff. So it would be the additional creation. Some people are pros and positives of this side think more elected officials is more oversight and more transparency, and the cons are it limits what the county commission can do in certain capacities. So those are the two sides of the coin on that. Amendment number 11 deals with the removal of obsolete provisions. Now, traditionally, there's in governing documents, things become outdated. As technology changes and resources change and the world changes, things become outdated in this. And Amendment number 11 specifically gives the people an ability to clean up the language in some of the constitutional provisions, which there hasn't been really any opposition to this amendment. It's frankly an amendment that just cleans things up and makes it much more current, modern, and definitive in regarding all of the constitutional amendments. Amendment number 12 deals with the lobbying of public officials. Now, what Amendment number 12 does is really prohibits an elected official from lobbying, meaning convincing government to do things, up for 6 years after leaving office. Now, that means essentially that a legislator, a local elected official like myself, or anybody that's elected for office, once they leave office, there's a ban on them that they cannot go and lobby, which essentially prevents lawmakers who have a vested interest in the system to then leave and lobby potentially their former colleagues or other organizations. And the con of this is you're essentially restricting what people can and can't do for a living. Excuse me. The final amendment, we've gotten to the end. Amendment 13 ends dog racing. That's the most simple way to put it. So what does it mean? A yes on this is yes for animal rights. You're voting to stop greyhound racing. It's an industry that in Florida we have more dog tracks than most states combined. We are the state with the most dog tracks. This would effectively end that and have a tiered down system of of panning down dog racing, and it would be prohibited. Now, the con side of that is that there's people whose whole industry is based on that. There's dog breeders, kennel clubs, things of that in that organization, and those people would all lose their livelihoods. So those are the two coins, the two sides to all these amendments in an informative way. All the newspapers and some of the other organizations are putting together their own lists, but get informed. These amendments can change how a lot of people live their life in Florida. It's going to affect your taxes. It's going to affect smoking habits. It's going to affect dog races, dog rights, human rights, everything under the board. So learn. We're happy to provide this informative brief session, and we're going to do another one in regarding some of the Broward County charter revision amendments that you're going to see as well on this very long ballot. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you soon, Coconut Creek.